Hello, everyone. Um, just before, I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes just to join. Well, 30 seconds to a minute to join. If you can hear me super clearly, I'm going to share my screen as well in a second. And if you can see my screen, please could you just pop in a wave or something in the chat or a yes, I can hear you. Anything like that would be brilliant. And then we'll just give it a few more seconds for some other people to join and we'll get started. Cool. Great. Looks like everyone can hear me. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, let's get started. And we'll let anyone else that needs to join will join sort of as we're going through the agenda. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining the workshop. We really, really appreciate your time today. And today we're going to talk about spec-driven development and how you can go from a vague idea to production using AI. So really, really quick introduction. My name's Alex. I'm technical education lead at BitterBrains. I previously ran a tech education company, which was acquired late last year, and I'm lucky enough to join the amazing team at BitterBrains. We have been working on the Unlearn platform, which some of you may know about. Some of you probably already have inside access, which is amazing. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment as well. But for those of you who don't know, I'm just going to give you a really brief talk about Unlearn. So we launched Unlearn because we realized that I think my screen's unshared itself. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Share screen. Okay, so we launched Unlearn because we realized that traditional developer education is changing, and we wanted to create a hub for developers to come and keep up to date with not just AI, but whatever happens in the future. So our promise for Unlearn is to be that developer hub to give you the edge, regardless of what happens. Things change so quickly. And we all know that massive disruption. So we're going to be here to help you out. We've kicked off early access, which we have seats full at the moment. So we were lucky enough to get over 1,000 people already inside and going through what we offer in Unlearn. But our plans are much bigger for the future. So we start off with workflows and teaching you workflows. We've got some courses in there. You may have already joined. You may have joined the last workshop I did where I spoke about the vision for Unlearn. And we want to make this an amazing place for developers to come and keep up to date, with this changing environment. So we're going to have a huge amount within here. But let's go and get into the presentation. And I'm just really going to quickly go through the agenda. We'll come back to Unlearn later. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is why spec-driven development matters, why it's different from prompt-driven development or vibe coding. We're then going to go into a practical on my end where I'm going to create out a product, a small product, but a product nonetheless, using a spec without going back and forward with AI. So without sort of you watching me just prompt things and fix things, we're going to have a proper spec built out. Then we'll go in and show you how to apply this spec to actually build the product. And fingers crossed that goes well, because we know that with AI, this could take like 20 minutes, it could take 5 minutes. And then we're going to go into a hands-on activity where you may have already set stuff up on your end, but we're going to be you're going to be adding a feature to the project I build live, and spec it, build it, and then review it, and then wrap everything up. So we will be doing a Q&A at the end, which is going to be a great opportunity for you to ask any questions. If you miss anything, if you're not sure about anything, or if you have any sort of broader questions, I'm happy to answer them. Please go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on this, and the team behind the scenes are amazing. They're keeping an eye on this as well. Okay, so let's go through a quick intro here. So Spec-driven development, you may or may not have come across it, but why does this matter? Why do we not just jump into our editor or our terminal, boot up Claude, and just start to prompt away? Why does this stuff matter? Well, without a spec, requirements for a product live in your head, other people's head, or in like scroll back, either in like your terminal or something like that. So it's really difficult to piece together what changes you want to make in a product without having a written spec. Um, every prompt that you make, but obviously particularly when you finish up with your session for the day and you come back, it feels a little bit like a fresh start. There's no history to it. You don't quite know what you did the previous day, what tasks you have. There's context that's lacking. And this actually gets even worse when you bring other people into a team onto the same project. So the context is just completely lost within a team. Your agent tends to fill gaps in your idea of what you think you want. And I say what you think you want because, as we'll see later, sometimes what you think you want doesn't quite cut it with guesses. So some are great, agents are really capable, but some are just really awful. And we all have been in this place before. We build a product, we then have to go back again, um, and we have to fix stuff up. And then we get into this cycle where we're like prompting, fixing, and it doesn't feel right. You only discover the bad stuff after the code is written. So you basically, after you've paid essentially in time and money, you then discover, that something's gone wrong. You have to go back and fix it. Now, with a spec, intent, so what you want to do is written down and it's reviewable by you, your agent, and anyone else on your team before any code runs. But you know what I mean, before any code is written. And it's one source of truth for everyone. So there's no ambiguity. You read what you want, and your agent should understand what you want, and of course, your team as well. And because of this, bad decisions that are potentially about to get made, and we'll see these shortly, get caught on paper, obviously digitally, where they're really cheap and easy to fix within a markdown document or something like that. You don't have to go back and fix it. And the spec outlives the chat as well. So we're going to be talking about proposals today, which we're going to be putting into a spec. And for some reason, my screen is not sharing again. I don't know why. Let's just bring that back up. Yeah, so the spec outlives the chat. So when you do have a spec and you have a living spec that grows with your project, your agent always has context of the decisions that have been made in the past, and you tend to find the next session move forward with more success, and that compounds. It's like a snowball effect. So the shift here is just stop prompt, or stop steering your agent prompt by prompt. Like I just said, prompting, fixing. It's really nice to have this upfront time to agree on what you're building and then just let your agent build it. I saw this I saw this post on X recently. You've probably seen it. I'm going to try and mute this in time. It's yeah, it's make no errors, do not hallucinate. You're an expert software engineer. We've probably all been here before. I love this because it's so true. When my agent, I use Claude Code, starts to not do what I want to do, my cap locks key goes on. I'm like shouting at it. And this spec-driven development in general is just is a much calmer approach to software engineering. Really, the goal here is obviously to be quicker and not have to battle this. Otherwise, there's no point using AI. So what are we doing today? Well, we're going to build a poll creator app. So a small enough app that I can fit into this workshop, but it's going to be a working product, and we're going to build this using spec-driven development. And we're going to be using OpenSpec. Some of you may have used OpenSpec before. Some of you may not. There are alternatives to this as well, which we'll talk about later, but that's what we're going to be doing here today. So I'm going to go through very quickly what OpenSpec is for those of you who haven't used it before. So OpenSpec is a framework. It's not a replacement for your agent or anything like that. It's a framework for spec-driven development workflows with AI. and it allows you to capture your change before you write the code. So there are tons of different workflows that you can get into with this, but there is generally a three-step cycle. I like to condense this down into the three-step cycle to make it easy. The first one is propose. So you propose within your agent using the OpenSpec framework what needs to change. That could be the prototype, which we're going to be doing today, or it could be a bug fix. It could be a refactor. It could be a new feature. Anything. You propose it, you work through it, and you make sure it looks good before you go ahead and apply it. The apply process will take the spec or the proposal, hand it over to your agent, and it will implement against it. So by this point, you're pretty confident that your spec or the proposal is good enough, and you're confident this is going to be built pretty much spot on the first time. Now, a really important step is once you're done with that proposal and you've implemented that, you then archive this into the living spec, or you fold it into a living spec. So your project has or your application, whatever you want to say, has a history of what has been done, which is really important for context. And we'll see this process later. So a really quick note on tools. OpenSpec isn't the only tool that you can use. We're massive believers of using specs to get really good outcomes. But you can do whatever you like. Within Unlearn, within the workflows that we teach this at a really high fundamental level, so you can understand how workflows work, how specs work, the benefits of specs, how to test your agent, how to make sure that you have upfront everything that you need before it starts to build. And this methodology shift is quite difficult for a lot of people because it's like a lot of upfront time trying to read things. As developers, we like to sort of jump in and just start to code. But unfortunately, with AI, across teams that I've seen, at least the best way to do this is by putting a little bit of upfront time in specs. And the best thing is you don't need to write the specs yourself. So as we'll see. Okay, so just before we get started, today it's super exciting. We have a workshop only offer. So what we have done is we've opened up 50 seats. As you saw earlier, seats are currently full on Unlearn. We've opened up 50 seats just for the duration of this workshop. So you can head over to the URL, which should be coming into the chat soon, or go ahead and scan this QR code. This locks you in membership on Unlearn to join those 1,000 odd people who have already joined for a much lower price. That's 169 a year. That will be locked in, and you won't pay a penny over that in time. So we'll check back in on this later, but it's a really good opportunity to sign up and see what we're doing. And there's a lot of value in what we're teaching. So this is really exciting. So feel free to jump in and grab a membership, and I will see you inside. Let's check in on this later. And we'll see here that, yeah, we've got 50 seats left. We'll come back to this a little bit later. Okay, so we're going to go into the main sort of presentation now. And again, my screen has stopped sharing itself. I don't know why this is happening, but I'm keeping an eye on things. So we're all good. Let's pull this down here. Okay, brilliant. So we're going to go into the sort of main spec-driven development presentation now. And we're going to do this a little bit differently. Rather than me just talk about why vibe coding isn't good, I'm going to show you a example of something that I built using just a simple prompt. So I gave Claude Code this prompt earlier, and I just hit enter. So this is build me a simple poll app. Users should be able to create a poll with a question and some options. They should be able to share it, let people vote, and we want to show the results after voting. And then I gave it some light technical direction. I'd already set up a Laravel project, but I wanted to give it some technical direction as well. Now, this is pretty standard. I mean, when we think about a poll app, and we think actually it's quite simple. We ask a question, we add some options, we hit submit, we get a poll link, we give it to people, we register the votes. What could go wrong? What is difficult about this? So in my mind, this prompt encapsulated everything that I wanted. And it took about 3 minutes, 50 seconds to build. And we did get a working app, but it missed some things. And it also made some really, really bad choices as well. So let's go ahead and just take a look at this. So I have this under quick poll vibe.test, I think. Yeah. Let's go ahead and open this up and I will show you what it looks like. So first, aside from it looking a little bit boring and sort of, Tailwind standard, it looks like it could work. So let's say something like, what's your favorite agent? Say Claude Code and Codex. We can hit add an option here. So obviously we can add a third option. I did spot a bug here as well, where if I click create poll on here, I don't think it works and it doesn't give us any feedback. So that's not great. And let's go ahead and click create poll. So we get the poll link here and everything seems good. And then I thought, wow, actually, this has done a pretty good job. We can copy the link, we can share the poll. We can also vote on it as well, which is good. But then I started to think, well, how do I manage this poll as a admin? And also, how does the browser know that I have voted on this poll? And that started to sort of worry me. So I came over to Claude Code and I said, how does the poll know we have voted? Obviously, I can look at the code, but I didn't want to do that. And this will take a minute to just work its way through. But it basically came back with the answer. We're using cookies in the browser to mark whether someone has filled the poll in or not. And that's not great. That's a pretty much a really, really bad decision to make in an application, because I can just come over to storage here. Obviously, I can come over to cookies, get rid of that, and then I can, vote again or vote for the same one and basically, ruin the poll by creating loads of requests. So that's why. And let's just check back in on Claude. Yeah, it sort of explained itself in here and gives us practical consequences. Now, it didn't give me them practical consequences before. And that's the point of spec-driven development, where we will see them up front. It will ask us the questions about them before we start to actually build. So one thing that I actually really do love doing, if your time allows for it and if your usage within your agent allows for it, is do a bad build like this. See what assumptions your agent makes, not just about an MVP like what we're building here, but also about individual features. Create a new branch and see what it's going to do before you go in and then fix it. So I use this bad build to fill in the gaps here. So we've got a rough vibe coded version. We know what's wrong or what's missing, and it helps us discover the features that we do actually need. So then I came up with this list. I won't go through them all, but the main ones are that we don't want auth, because we don't want people to have to sign up for a website to vote, but we want some sort of verification. So I just chose email verification here. So when we do build this eventually, we want to be able to ask users to enter their email address to click a magic link to verify their vote. Obviously, there's still room for abuse here, but it's a lot better. And of course, if you were weaving this into a already existing product, you wouldn't have that problem, because you could scope this to a user ID. So using that bad build, which I always tend to do, I try to do that as much as possible. I've got a list of actual features that I want, and I've got something in my head that becomes the starting point for our spec. So with that said, we are going to now jump in and actually use open code to build out a spec to build this project. So I have got, we'll just get rid of this vibe coded version, because we do not want to use this. I've got a base application set up. Now, if you saw the notes from that we shared beforehand, if you do want to follow along with this, you can, but please feel free to practice this afterwards, and we'll have 15 minutes to do the hands-on as well. So what I'm going to do here is I already have OpenSpec installed. I'm going to go ahead and initialize OpenSpec within this project. So to do that, I'm just going to say OpenSpec init. Now, what this will do is it will give us some quick start stuff, but it will allow us to, my screen's gone again. It will allow us to, there we go, choose the agent that we're using. So I'm using Claude Code here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that, and we're in. Now, what does this do? Well, let's go over to PHP Storm quickly. It doesn't matter, again, what IDE you're using here. You'll get here an OpenSpec directory created. Don't worry at the moment if any of this is like confusing, like are we actually doing here? We're going to dive into what gets created in here, and this will start to make sense. So what we have here, and I'm just going to boot Claude up. I'm also going to use dangerously skip permissions, which I wouldn't recommend you do. I'm just doing it for time, so I don't have to approve anything while we're going through the stream. This will now give us a list of OPSX commands. So all of these are prefixed with OPSX. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off by exploring. Now, you can propose a change immediately, or you can explore. And these two commands do pretty much, they don't do the same thing. Propose, you'll always propose a change. So we will use the propose command. But explore is kind of like plan mode within OpenSpec. So we're going to say OPSX explore, and then we're going to paste in a prompt. Now I have a prompt over here based on what I just said, where we have the bad build. So let's come over here and paste this in. Once I've hit enter on this, we'll review it. It's just you can't see it at the moment. So I've run the explore command, and I'm going to say, let's build a simple poll app. It should have these features. So it's pretty much what I just showed you in the slideshow. And this doesn't need to be complex. It's really just a list of features I want. There's always going to be some mistake in here, something I've forgotten. This does not need to be perfect whatsoever. We're in an explore mode where it's starting to think about how viable this is, or if there are any edge cases, and OpenSpec is going to do that for us. We don't necessarily need to think about this. We do at some point, need to actually think about what we want, but OpenSpec will start to test this out for us. So we're just going to wait for that to run through. It shouldn't take very long at all. And we should start to see some output here. So let's just wait for this. Pray that Claude doesn't go down. And yeah, it shouldn't take too much longer. Okay, great. So now we start to see some output coming through. Now, because we are, not short of time on the workshop, but we don't have hours to read through this, you would read through this. It's basically giving you a spec and giving you all the issues it might come across. So this is really, really helpful. It's telling us what we should leave out and all of that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of the time, what it will do, it hasn't done in this instance, is it will ask us some questions. And actually, yeah, it has. So sometimes it puts them into a nice a list for us, like a 1, 2, 3 list, but here it's a little bit broader with the information. So we can go through here and basically tell it about these decisions. Or I could start to ask questions in this explore mode. I could say, what might there be room to creep here within the scope? It really depends on what you're building, but you really just grill it at this point and really think through what you want, what you don't want. Read the spec. If anything doesn't look right, you go ahead and change it. There's a huge amount of information here. So we're going to go ahead and just answer some of these questions. So let's say cookie versus email, are they redundant? Your spec lists both one vote for browser session, cookie-based, and hashed email. So we want both. So we're going to say, let's say we would like cookie to render the vote and email to verify it, if that makes sense. Let's go ahead and have a look here. Signed roots. So I know that within Laravel, I want to use signed roots for this. And 2 slugs, 1 ID plus signed admin token. Yeah, so a signed admin token isn't probably the best way to do this, just because the link might hover around in browser history and it's not as secure, but we'll go with it just as a start. And I think that's good. Now, at this point, you can ask any more questions, for example, just to check if there is anything that is missed. You can add more details. If you realize you've left something off by reading this, you can go ahead and, just start to refine this. Just remember, at this point, you do not need to commit to anything at all. What I love about this is it's a really calm approach. I'm not going to immediately, after this spec has been built and I've gone through everything, I'm not going to immediately say right now just build it. So we don't need to commit at this point to what we're doing. So let's just make sure we're all good here. Okay, so I'm just going to wait for this to go through. And again, it will take about a minute. So we'll just wait for this to go through. I'm just checking the chat just to see if there are any like questions popping up while we wait for this. Okay, it's asking us some more questions as well. Brilliant. So what I'm going to do here is just say you decide. Or at this point, yeah, okay, let's just let it decide. So you would obviously put a lot more time into this than I have. We would go through and we would really, really look at what's going on here. But bear in mind, we're still in explore mode. What we're now going to do is we're going to convert this, the context that we have in here, not just what's written here, but just the general context that we have. We're going to convert this into a proposal. And to do that, we're going to use OPSX propose. Now with this, bear in mind, we can name this as well, or you could just jump in with propose if you wanted to. So for example, if I was adding a feature to this application, I would jump in with OPSX propose and I would say, time limit feature or something like that. And then it would go ahead and create a proposal based on what you've added as that argument. And that argument could be a huge document or it could be a one line, it could be a slug, it doesn't really matter. But OPSX propose on its own is going to take all of the context, the back and forth that we've gone through and really thought about this, and it will add and convert it to a proposal. And we're going to see in a minute what that proposal looks like as this goes through. And I'm just going to move myself out of the way as well so you can see this working through as well. So yeah, I'm just having a look. Okay, so there's a question. How would you compare this to Claude's plan mode? So generally, I do actually love using Claude's plan mode. I find it the same sort of process, but what you'll find is at the moment, this is creating files for us. So the reason that OpenSpec works like a framework is it's going to create files like the proposal MD file, which we're going to check out in a moment, the design MD, the specs and the tasks. These are pretty consistent every time in the same way that they're created. And what that means is we have a really easy way to review these. We automatically get a list of checked tasks, which is something that we cover on Unlearn, but this does it for you. So this will create a markdown list of tasks for us, which we can then go ahead and just work through, or our agent can work through. And that gives us several benefits, which we'll talk about. So although this does feel like Claude's plan mode, it's a lot more powerful, a lot more powerful. So you'll start to see the difference as we go through the rest of the workshop. So hopefully that will be answered already. Okay, so let's actually jump over to our editor because we can start to look at this. So notice the specs directory is empty. Specs we're going to talk about later. That's sort of like what we fold into. But we now got this add polls directory. And we can open up the proposal here and just have a look. So this has created a proposal for this feature. Now, this feature is an MVP. We're building the whole thing from scratch, which I sort of would and wouldn't recommend doing at the same time, just because you don't want too big a changes. But when you're, building an MVP, you kind of want to do it all in one go. We'll talk about a technique that we can use a little bit later to get around this. So we get a proposal, so you can go ahead and read through that. You get a design document as well, which is sort of more of the granular decisions that it makes to actually build this out. You can read through that as well. And let's just wait for this. My absolute favorite here, and probably one of the reasons that I absolutely love using this framework. And we also have our own skill over on Unlearn to generate checklists, pretty similar to OpenSpec. Once this comes through, I'll show you what this looks like. So it should come through very, very soon. And yeah, looks like that's done. Perfect. So you can see here we've got, which I love, this broken up into sections. So it's like big chunks of what the work that we need to do. And going back to the plan mode thing that we spoke about, yes, plan mode does do this often, but just bear in mind that this is agent agnostic. It will work with any agent that works with skill files. There's no MCP servers as well. So it's just a bunch of skill files. So now that we've got all this stuff, I just want to really quickly introduce I didn't build this, so I'm not introducing it, but tell you about a tool here. Where is it? Okay, my screen's unshared again. Have a look. Okay, so let's have a look here. Tools. Where is it? Maybe it's just disappeared. That's really weird. Okay, let me just try and find this because it is really useful. Let's go into plugins and let's have a look here. Spec. It needs an update. That's why. Sorry. Let's just get this updated. Okay. And do we need to restart? Yeah, we do. Okay. Let me just restart. I promise you this is worth it because if you do want to work with OpenSpec, this is going to be really good. So OpenSpec, spelled SPEK, turns everything that we've just generated into like a viewable spec like this. So inside of this directory, we've got add polls. So we can read the proposal. We can look at the design document, much easier to read. This works in VS Code as well. So it's it's a plugin that you could probably pull into whatever editor you're using. And therefore it would work in Cursor. We've got a list of the tasks here as well. So I really love this because over time, particularly, this gives us our task completion rate, what we've archived, the active changes, super useful across the team as well. So one to jot down if you're going to use OpenSpec. I absolutely love this. Okay, so we've created our spec. We've got everything here. Let me just pull up my notes because I don't want to miss anything within here. Okay, so one thing that I haven't done just yet, which we probably should have done beforehand, but there's no problem because we can update this now, is at least have some basic guardrails in place. Now, again, we cover guardrails and why they're important within Unlearn, but particularly for this build, I'm going to go ahead and just get started with a really basic agents file. And to do this, I'm just going to come over to here and just ask my agent, fill in agents MD with my tech stack. Now, interestingly as well, we'll go into this perhaps later, we have a config here as well, specifically for OpenSpec, which you can use. I don't tend to do that because I like to keep everything inside of agents, but you can feel free to use that as well, either one. I also have some very basic conventions that I'll add to my agents.md file. So we've got the tech stack in here. I don't necessarily need all of this stuff here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to add a conventions section. I always kick off my agents MD with a basic conventions section for things like this. There might be more, and we'll try and add one as we go through the build a little bit later. So that's what I would do here. Okay. So we have gone ahead and explored some changes, or a proposal as we call it. So we've explored what we might add to a proposal using explore mode. Once we have that in place, we then go ahead and propose it. But like I said, if you just want to propose a change and give a basic prompt in here, you can do that. Now, what do we do? And I think I'm going to come over to my slideshow for this. No, I'm not. We're gonna talk about that now. So what do we do if the spec doesn't look right, or if the proposal doesn't look right? So I'm obviously going to read this, and if I spot something that's not correct, what I would tend not to do is go in and change this directly. So I wouldn't go in and start adding stuff in here manually. What I would do is I would come over to my agent. and I would change it in here. So you just need to ask it basically. So can we do X instead of Y? Have that update the proposal that you have. Super important to do that. The reason that it's important to do that is because OpenSpec knows about its own structure. You might change something in the proposal that might be inside of the design document, or worse, inside of a list of tasks, which you would then have to go ahead and manually change. We don't, the goal here is to be quick. We don't really want to go ahead and manually change this stuff. So what you are doing now is spending 80% of your upfront time working on the spec, reviewing the spec, and tweaking it, which can get a little long, but you need to get used to doing that in order to get the best results the first time. So yeah, that's pretty much the spec built out. We have some basic stuff in agents.md. I would also recommend adding in some like linting and stuff, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So yeah, we have basically now ended up with a spec. We've potentially refined the spec as well, and gone ahead and done that. In fact, let's go ahead and we've got a little bit of time. Let's refine the spec, and I'm specifically going to do this for the design of the spec. So I'm just going to pull over a small prompt. So I'm going to say, could we adjust the UI design? We want modern, clean, monotone, minimalist design with subtle use. In fact, no, I'm going to get rid of subtle. I want lots of transitions. We're going to use transitions everywhere. So let's just watch together what this does, and we will see what this looks like. So again, I'll just pop over to the chat just while this is running through. Spec isn't showing in the marketplace for PHP Storm. Yeah, I had that issue actually before. I don't know what I did to fix it. It definitely is there, but yeah, have another look and see if you can find it. Okay, this is coming through now. So yeah, okay. So we've got some new design language that's been added to Design MD, of course. Design as well, obviously, doesn't just mean UI design, but it's gone ahead and added that in there anyway. This is great. So we can go ahead and review that. Now, interestingly, because we've made an adjustment to our spec, it's automatically picked up what I added to Agents MD, and it now needs our call. So we've got like a contradiction now. So the great thing is it's told us this. So yeah, let's say yes, and it will fold the convention fixes into the design and tasks, because inside of tasks, it probably now conflicts over with like API resources. I think I added to this that I always want to make sure that we're using API resources for passing data down to our views to keep structured data. So we're just going to say yes and let that fold in. So as you can see, this isn't, there's no real skill involved in this. It's, we don't need to learn prompt engineering. We just basically talk to our spec and just have it, and do what we want to do. So this is great. So yeah, let's just have a look in the comments. I can't see anything at the moment. But obviously, we'll come back to anything in the Q&A later. But this looks like it's pretty much, fixing up what we want. Now, I can't stress this enough that, I have really skipped over the review part of our spec. If I was to review this now, we'd be here for hours probably. And also, this is a pretty big feature because it's our MVP. But yeah, you would go through and, just get to the point where you're super happy with this. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. But it's a good idea to make sure that you are reviewing everything. And like I said, you can use that spec plugin to do that as well. Okay, so yeah, this spec is now finishing up. We've got everything that we need in here. We're at the point, let's just pretend where I've reviewed this really carefully and I'm super happy with the direction it's going. I do actually trust this a lot more than, just prompting alone. So we should be good. So let's go to a really quick 5-minute break. And then after that, we'll come back and we will start to actually implement the stuff that we've created. I'll keep an eye on the chat as well during the break. So if there are any questions that you have specifically, I'll go ahead and answer them as well. So yeah, we'll be back in around about 5 minutes, and we will pick up on building this from our spec. Hey, we are just coming back now. And I can hear myself. There we go. Great. If everyone can hear me still, if you could just pop a quick message in the chat so I don't start talking away to myself, that would be amazing. And we'll get started on actually building this. Amazing. So, okay, we're going to jump straight into this because Obviously, this can take a little bit of time. While this is building, I'm going to talk you through some other stuff. But we're now going to go into the apply phase, the pause, the adjust guardrails, and all that kind of stuff. So let's jump into it. What does the apply phase look like? Well, it's OPSX apply. Super simple. We've already seen that we have a simple set of commands here throughout the OpenSpec workflow. You can get more complex than this. We're covering the absolute essentials today, but we basically, once we're happy with the proposal that we have, which we know lives over here, we go ahead and just apply it. Super simple. Now, we know that we have a tasks.md file, but what happens here? Well, the agent's going to read your tasks.md file, the proposal, the design. It will work through each section. It will work through each task, and it will check them off as it goes as well. It won't always do this in a linear fashion for each task one by one, but it will certainly check off the entire section before it moves on. Now, a really quick tip, which I'm going to do now, I sort of left this myself. I always forget to do this. An official tip from OpenSpec is to clear out your agent context before you run this apply command. If you've particularly gone through a long planning conversation within explore or propose, it can pollute the implementation. So just before I continue, again, that was a sort of reminder for me. I'm just going to go ahead and clear out my context within Claude Code. Let's just actually make sure that worked, and we should be good. And actually, I'm going to exit out because I really don't trust this. Okay, great. So pausing and resuming. So do we, plan out a proposal and then just go ahead and let it run and go and grab a cup of coffee or something? Well, you can do, but I just like to sit with it and see what it's doing, check the code as it's building, and in between that, I like to pause and resume it so I can figure out what's going on. Not everyone likes to do this, but I like to supervise things. So particularly at the start of a project, so I know which guardrails to adjust. And I know that generally the agent is going in the right direction. And like I said, this is going to compound over time because as you start to build up your folded in spec, which we'll look at later, you'll have the conventions in place. So you basically just stop the agent to pause it. There's no command here. We just stop it. And your progress already gets saved in tasks.md. And also if you're mid task, so if you're mid checklist task and it's written like a line of code and you exit out, don't worry, it's going to go back. It will know what's missing and it will figure it out. So to resume, you just rerun OPSX apply. It will skip completed tasks. Obviously, it will pick up from the next open one, even if you stopped mid-task. And of course, this applies to multi-day sessions as well, or sessions across different members of your team. So if someone starts on quite a large feature and then goes off and someone else picks it up, or someone else wants to pick it up, then that's absolutely fine as well. Probably should have mentioned this earlier, but you will want to commit this OpenSpec directory to your source control. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So guardrails mid-build. This is where I really like to supervise this. And if I see something going wrong, I pause, update agents.md, update linting rules, update static analysis rules, whatever I need to do. So examples could be like linting rules, test requirements. So for example, you might see a lack of specific tests that you would normally write. So you can go in and you can guide it to do that. Naming conventions, forbidden patterns, like if you spot any, like any types in TypeScript or raw SQL, you can go ahead and add that in. Dependency rules as well. And again, my screen's gone off, so that's not great. So dependency rules is one I love because this is one of the things that can be good. It can figure out what packages you need, or it can pull in packages you don't need, or it can pull in packages that might not have been maintained for a while and have lots of open issues. So I really, really love this one, just keeping an eye on what it's doing in the background. Now, once we have implemented something, we then go ahead and archive it. And why would we archive it? Well, this locks the change in to the project history. So we get the context of what we've done previously For example, you then get like a linear, this is what was added, this was removed, then it was re-added, then there was an issue with this, then that was fixed. You get all of this like rich project history throughout your project. So think of it as just like zipping up or compressing everything into one place. So yeah, the next change builds on what came before. You don't get a blank slate. Your agent already knows what the state of your project kind of looks like by reading code, obviously, but also looking at the specs. And you have a living document that grows, which is great. So we're going to go through and demo this now. And this is where this could, not go wrong, but obviously take a little while. But let's go ahead and just do basically everything that I've just said. So what do we want to do? Well, we're just going to do OPSX apply, and that is it. And it's just going to start to work through all of the changes. And we'll go through sort of pausing this and picking it back up, all of that good stuff. So let's go on here and we'll wait for this to sort of get started. So it's reading all of the documents that we need. It already knows how to do this, obviously. So it's taking into account everything that we have here. And let's just wait for some output to come through so we can look at what it's doing. Okay, so it's given us a progress update to the 53 tasks. This bit obviously is always going to take a while because we've cleared out our context, and it's going to go ahead and read the code base to understand what is already there. You can see as well, it's specifically picking up the feature that we want to implement. You can, of course, have multiple features as well. So you don't have to just have a single feature at a time. You could have lots of different proposals going, and you can only choose to implement one if you wanted to. Okay, so yeah, it's going through here, starting out with database migrations, moving on to models, form requests, and as that goes through, of course, it's going to just work through that. So yeah, let's go over to the markdown checklist as well. We're going to keep an eye on this, and then we're going to stop this as well very shortly. So we'll just wait for some of the code to actually get generated. And once we've done that, we'll have a look at that checklist. Then I'm going to go ahead and stop this mid-build, and we're going to talk about what we want to do. So I particularly want to get to the models bit because there is one guardrail that I specifically left out that I want to adjust. So it's working on the models here. Let's just wait for this to go through. You can see that these have been checked off as well. And yeah, it's already on the model. So let's open one of the models that has been created, and let's go ahead and decide to change something. So I'm going to open up, let's say, vote option maybe, or poll. Let's go with this one. So I'm going to adjust something like fillable here because I typically, as a developer, don't specify fillable fields. I set everything to unguarded. You may not agree with that, but I'm going to go ahead and just notice that there is something that I want to change. So like I said, I'm just canceling this off. It's been interrupted now. And it's fine. It doesn't matter. We don't care about this. We've got that checklist committed, and we can just cancel it off. So I'm going to go into agents.md, and I'm going to say, can we, and I would typically use my agent to do this, but I'm going to say, can we not use fillable, unguard globally in app service provider. And I think that's fine. Yeah. So once I've adjusted the guardrail, whether that's a linting rule, static analysis, anything that we need to do, whatever you need to do here, then you're just going to run OPSX apply again. That's going to pick up at the point that it was on. Obviously, what it's now going to do is going forward, it's going to look at your agents.md file and not make that same mistake again. Now, probably the confusing part around this is that, well, the change has already been made to our model here. And, it doesn't matter that this is the change. If you don't use Laravel or even PHP, it doesn't matter. But let's just say a change has been made like this. What do? Do we go back and do we update the spec now? Do we cancel it off and re-propose it? Well, no, what I would recommend doing is I would let the build go through. It is actually doing this. So it has actually picked it up, which is fine. But if it doesn't do this, what you can do is finish this proposal application, get it applied, then go back and create a new proposal to refactor what you have updated. So, you don't want to go back and update your proposal mid build, because then you're going to get to the point where you've got a bunch of stuff checked off that probably will then, not quite look right. That will give you issues later on when you fold that into your main spec. So just keep things as like individual changes. And once you start building, don't go back again. So this is still building through. Let's just have a look here and have a look. Okay. So I'm just going to go in and make sure, just sort of like some specific technical stuff. Just make sure that we've got mailer set to log, which we have. And the reason that I'm doing that is because when we test this, we don't want to actually send real emails because we don't have time to hook this up. Okay. So let's go over to here. Okay, so progress looks good. I'm just going to jump over to the chat and answer some questions while this is going through, because otherwise you're just going to sit here and watch this. Okay, so does this tool do TDD to validate each task, is actually working? Really, really good question. I'm a massive fan of TDD with AI. I didn't used to be. Now, what I didn't specify with this is that we wanted tests to be written up front, which is something that I generally do when I'm building with stuff. So it won't do TDD as in by default write a test and then implement the feature afterwards. But if you ask your proposal, however big it is, whether it's a huge one like this or a smaller feature, if you ask it to do tests first, then yes, of course it will. It will do, it will probably, if we just open up our tasks here, it will probably, for each thing or for each section, here we've got, this is broken up slightly weirdly, so it wouldn't quite work out. It would probably create a task to write a test. And then it would run your tests, and then it would implement the feature against the test. And I tend to find that better when you're working with AI, because it gives you the opportunity to review what tests are being written. So you know that what's important, the testing functionality. We're going to cover that in a huge amount within the next workflow that's available on Unlearn, and we're going to have some really good sort of like workflow steps to go through and get into doing that as well. So yeah, that's definitely something that you can ask your proposal to do. Another question here, what if I want to apply one task at a time and not all at once? Is that possible with OpenSpec? Yes, it is. So what I would do, I think this works. I'm going to have to double check, and I'm going to say this now, don't take it at face value, but I would say OPSX apply task one. So just like task one only, or whatever it's called, then you can go ahead and I'm pretty sure that will then just implement that task only, and then it will stop. So yeah, give that a try, but if not, just cancel it off, and then you can go through it. But I'm pretty sure you can do that. Let's have a look here. We've got another question that I answered a little bit earlier. No, this doesn't work exclusively with Claude Code. It works with a ton of agents. Maybe I didn't show that clearly earlier. So let me just go into the Vive coded one, and I'll open spec in it to show you. So yeah, it will work with, it does work with Cursor. It works with all of these agents that you can see here. So you can go ahead and choose, let me just get myself out of the way. You can go ahead and choose whatever you want in here. And of course you can choose multiple as well. You just check through the ones that you want and the ones that you don't want. So super handy. And that's why I like this, because it's agent agnostic pretty much. As long as agents support skill files, it's fine. Another question, what if I need to code? Yeah, really good question. If you need to jump in and change anything manually, that's absolutely fine as well. You can jump in and just change anything you want. Because OpenSpec is just a framework for the specs, it doesn't really matter as such. Your agent is going to work out that something has changed, as long as you're not making great big changes that are going to sort of interfere with the spec, then you can absolutely do that as well. There's no issue with doing that. Okay, I'm just having a look at some other questions as well and keep it. Oh, we're nearly done actually. So we'll be able to have a look at this in a minute as well. Let's have a look here. So when using spec tools like this, is there a guide for what level of subscription is required based on the token consumption? Okay, so to give you an idea of this, not really, no. Let's just jump into Claude and go over to my usage here. Yeah, so obviously there's been a little bit of controversy around this at the moment, but you can see I haven't really done much today aside from like a couple of little adjustments to the slideshow, which is also built with AI, by the way. So I've used 20% just in this session. Now, that could just be, I'm also on the max plan, so the 5 times max plan. So yeah, that's a lot of usage. And yeah, you are going through a lot of tokens here because you've got lots of text and stuff like that. But give it a try. See how it lands. And obviously there are tons of different agents that you can use as well. So I've disappeared from here. The screen's disappeared again. Let's pull this up. Okay. Okay, so we're very, very close to the end of the build. Let me just have a look. Please font size plus. Okay, let's bump everything up here. And okay, yes, it's doing manual verification here. So let's take a look at this because manual verification is for us. So that's finished now. Now these tasks, and OpenSpec pretty much always does this. These tasks are for us to complete. So manually go in and test stuff. I'm actually going to leave these. We are obviously going to test the app and see what it actually looks like. But we would go through and we would check these off. We could either go through them one by one and manually check them, or you could ask your agent to check them off for you. Or if you're using that plugin like Spec, which I can see a couple of people are having issues with, if you can physically check stuff off in there as well, which is great. Okay, so let's go over to the browser and let's actually have a look at what this looks like. There we go. Okay, so already this looks better because I did give it some design direction. Let's go ahead and test this out. Now, because we are just demoing this, we want to get rid of our log because our emails are going to come through in our log. So let's ask a question. What's your favorite agent? We bump this up as well in case you're having trouble seeing it. Let's say Claude Code and Codex. Add an option. Already it just feels better. I'm going to click create poll. We had that bug, remember, before with the basic prompt where it, just didn't do anything if we'd left an option empty. But now obviously we've got client side validation, which we would have probably known if we'd have actually read the spec. And I'm pretty sure this is going to have added proper, feedback validation as well. So I'm going to create the poll. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. So this is not good. Let me just make sure okay, let's do this again. We'll just test this out quick. Might need I'll tell you what I need to do and run dev. That would help. That was probably why. So I'm hoping that's why. Anyway, so let's say, what's your favorite agent? And we're going to say Claude Code, Codex, and we're going to click create poll. Okay, so yeah, it actually wasn't. Okay, this is the absolute worst possible outcome. So what can we do here? Let's think. Quick poll.test. What can we do? What can we do? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull down the version that I built earlier. Now, I actually read the spec from the version that I built earlier. So that's going to, be the one that we're going to be adding the feature to. In the meantime, I'll see if there are any actual issues with that and why this is actually doing this, because it definitely shouldn't. I'm actually just going to try it one more time. Yeah, that's really weird. Okay, right. Let's go ahead and just pull down the other version. So this is the version that we're going to be building the feature onto a little bit later. So let's go into our main directory here and let's pull down this. So this was the version that I built earlier when I actually created the spec and read the spec. So we're going to go and just clone this down and let's clone this into quick poll and let's just call this built. Okay, so let's go over to quick poll built and okay, let's just enable this real quick. And let's get everything installed here. Now, I went through a test run of this like 2 times, and yeah, it's just amazing that it just didn't work. So let's just copy over our EMV example to EMV, PHP artisan, key generate, and let's see, migrate as well. So all the setup instructions that we went over in the docs. And let's finally run composer dev. Okay, so I'm going to go back and check out what went wrong with the other build a little bit later, possibly while you're doing the exercise. But this is the app that I built for using exactly the same method as we've just seen, but I actually read the spec to make sure everything looked good. We might have also broken something as well when we added the guardrails mid-build, but we'll go back and adjust that, and I'll come to you with a conclusion. So we can create a poll. Let's get stuck in on this again. What's your favorite agent? And we'll do Codex and Claude Code. And we click create poll. So now that we build something from a spec, we get pretty much everything we want. The ability to copy the link here, which is what we had before. We can go ahead and paste that over to people. We get email verification. We get an admin panel. Although it's basic, we can actually see what we're doing here with the amount of votes. We can close the poll as well. So that's something that we didn't have the ability to do before. So although I can vote here and I can go ahead and add in my email address to send a magic link. So there we go. We've gone ahead and sent that over. Let's just open this up in our editor and we'll have a look at this. So we've got quick poll built and we should have over in our Laravel log. Let's just go ahead and resend that over. Send a magic link and there we go. And that comes through. So this is basically just like an email that would get sent through. And we would use the URL. Obviously, we would actually click on it and we would count the vote and then the vote gets counted. So although the build that we just didn't work, I'll figure that out and I'll let you know exactly why it didn't work. This is the result of what I did previously prior to the session with Spec-Driven development. So this is what we end up with once we are done, once we've applied the changes, paused it, fixed guardrails, resumed it, and all that good stuff. So the last thing that we're going to do just before we move on to the hands-on activity is we're going to archive this. Now, when do we archive something? Well, we can archive something at really any point. If you're working alone, typically what I would do is I would grab the changes in here. So I'd grab the spec. In fact, we need to go back to our other one to demo this. So I would basically build out a proposal. I would have it build it, verify that it works, of course. And then I would go and I would fold it immediately into the spec or archive it into the spec. But you could also archive it after you pushed it to source control and it's been reviewed by someone or reviewed by, AI, like using a service like CodeRabbit. Or you could archive it once the feature has been deployed and is being used by users, and you know that you're not going to roll it back. So you can archive it at any point. But the question is, how do we archive something? Well, we go ahead and we use OPSX archive. And then once we've done that, that will go ahead and archive that change. Now, it will warn us because at this point, remember, if we just open up the tasks, we have a bunch of tasks that have not been completed, which is our manual verification, which I'm going to go through in the break while you build on this and tell you exactly what went wrong. So that will archive this out, but it will, you can see here two things to confirm before archiving. We've got 8 out of 53 tasks still empty. So yeah, we can go ahead and sync specs, then archive, which is the recommended. So we've got the polls and voting delta specs in there, and then archive, and that leaves the 8 manual verification tasks unchecked. I'm going to leave them unchecked because I'm going to show you what that looks like, especially within the view that we saw. But yeah, we're just going to go ahead and say that we want that to all be archived in. So let's just wait for this to go through. I'm going to head to the comments and just have a look while that is doing. A really good question here. What to do if my current code base has no specs? Can I just create a spec for the new feature? Yeah. So I, what I would do is if you have an existing product, just start to build. Just start your next proposal and then start the spec from that point. It's pretty easy to think to go back and like want to sort of create a spec for what you already have, but that will automatically start to come into your spec because it will understand what your system looks like. So if you have no specs in there, just start your next proposal, do OpenSpec in it, start a new proposal, archive the spec like we're doing now, and it will just start to build up your spec from that point as well. So let's have a look here. If we've got any other questions. Yeah, good point. Can you restore your logs from your history? You'll see what went wrong earlier in the generation. Yeah, I'll have a look at that in a bit because I don't know what's going on. It did it perfectly like 2, 3 times. I tested this before the workshop. Um, so another good question, if we introduce OpenSpec into a project, is it possible to use it for a single feature rather than across the whole project? Absolutely. The scope does not matter at all here. You can use it for a tiny feature. You can probably, if you want to get started on it, maybe just do it for like a really, really tiny change, like the smallest possible change you can think of, and just see how the process goes. The thing about OpenSpec is if you read the docs, it might sort of overwhelm you. It gives you like a really complex scenario for a workflow, which is fine. Okay, this has been archived now. We'll come back to some of the other great questions shortly, but let's take a look at the state of our code base. So let's go over to our archive here. So you can see we've got our OpenSpec changes archive, and that's been put into and timestamped as well, which is really helpful. Add polls. So that's now away. The next change you propose will go back into the changes directory. When you archive it, it will go back into the archive directory. So you've got the history there. That's another really good point. And again, I'm going to go back to the question about plan mode. I love plan mode, but it doesn't give you this rich history. Then we have the specs. So we've got 2 different specs here because these are technically sort of like broken up into polls and voting. And you can see here the requirement is create a poll. The system should allow any visitor, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And it gives you all the scenarios here as well as the voting spec as well. So the actual voting functionality, and that gives you that. And for smaller proposals, these will be folded into the specs as needed, and they'll just start to grow and you'll start to see them come up. Okay, I'm just going to go over and check on the sale here. We've got 10 seats left out of the 50. Thank you so much for the 40 of you that have signed up and locked in access at that price. Yeah, ends very soon as the workshop ends, and then it's gone. And yeah, unfortunately, we're still full of seats because we're in our closed beta. So I really hope you can take advantage of that. Have a look around the platform, see what we're doing. Really exciting. So we're going to go over to the hands-on activity now. If you're not doing the hands-on activity, absolutely fine. I'm going to head off, like, just to see what's gone on behind the scenes here. But let's just talk through the hands-on activity and what we're doing if you did want to go ahead and do it. So you should have got the document before the workshop. Let's just have a look here with the prep guide. So hopefully you've followed this. You've got your agent ready, and you've installed PHP and Composer if you wanted to follow along, and also globally installed OpenSpec. So you might have already looked at the exercise that we're going through, but let's just run through this. So hopefully you've gone through the get started if you do want to follow through. The task that we're doing here is to propose a new change and basically just do everything that I've just done here, but we're just going to add an individual feature. So if you are following this, I'm going to let you go ahead and add a time limit feature to this poll by creating a proposal or exploring if you want to, but that's going to take a little bit longer. So creating a proposal and going ahead and describing the problem here. I've not given you a prompt because you can just describe this from what you want to happen. Review the proposal. And then once you're happy, go ahead and apply the proposal and then test it to see if that it works, and then just see what happens. Now, the most important part of this hands-on is the spec itself and getting into the habit of looking at the spec, seeing what happens in your editor, reviewing it. Hopefully you can get through all of this in the 15 minutes, but if you can't, that's absolutely fine. The goal here is really just to get used to the spec process. And I'd spend more time personally looking at the spec and adjusting the spec over the actual working example. You could do that later if you don't have time. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and leave you to do this. So your task is to add a time limit to polls. I'll leave this up. Shall I leave the timer up or this up? You've got all the instructions in Notion, so I'll leave the timer up. But yeah, write the spec, build it, practice the loop. So review the code, stop it, restart it, and verify the feature against the proposal. That's a little sneaky one that I've added in because I've not actually gone through how you can verify an OpenSpec spec against what's being built. So you might need to head over to the OpenSpec docs to have a look at that and then archive it. And then feel free to share in the chat if something is going wrong, if it worked beautifully or if it didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and set a timer up here. And I'll be back with you really, really shortly. So like in about 15 minutes, and we'll discuss what went wrong, or hopefully not at what happened to me today. But yeah, hopefully everything goes good for you. So yeah, I'll see you back in 15 minutes, and let me know if you need anything in the chat. Okay, so I've come back a few minutes early. I have been looking at some of your questions as well. Uh, trying, yeah. So I'll answer some more in the Q&A, which might go over. We might go over time, but that's absolutely fine. So hopefully you're doing well if you are following the hands-on and you're adding a feature to the existing code base. That's great. I have actually gone ahead and fixed the issue that we had during the live stream. So let's just take a look at the actual version of this. Let's go to quick poll.test. And here we are. So this wasn't anything major. I basically just asked my agent, it's not right. Now, what we did do, what I did ask it to do, which is something that I haven't covered, but you can do, is verify let me just pull over my terminal here, verify the code against the spec. And this is really important. So what you can do is if you just come over to the directory that you're working in and go ahead and run OpenSpec config profile, what you can do is you can enable additional workflow components to OpenSpec. So what I did is I just went ahead and enabled verify change. Once you've done that, go ahead and get that saved by hitting enter. And then you can just run OpenSpec update and that will go ahead and sync the changes up to your project. Now what that allows you to do is then use the OSPX, where are we at the moment? Just reopen this up. OPSX verify command. Now I couldn't do this in this instance because I'd already demoed to you folding in the spec into folding in the proposal into the spec. So obviously we didn't have the proposal to verify the change against. There might be a way to do this, but typically it works before you archive something. So that is what I would have reached for have this not worked. But instead, I just asked my agent, and that's absolutely fine. And it fixed it pretty quickly. It was just a couple of issues that it had spotted. So now it's working really nicely here. So I'm just going to very quickly show you this, just so you believe me. So what's your favorite agent? And we've got a code. Codex, for example, add an option, create poll. We've got the public URL, which obviously if we open up gives us a nice UI here. It's a lot clearer. We'll send you a link to confirm your vote. We can go ahead and enter this in. Let me just open this up in here as well. So let's open up that log file and get rid of this. Right. Okay. So Alexander at fusescore.io. Okay, so check your email. We get the email in here. This now actually uses Laravel's signed URLs, which is exactly what we wanted. And when we come over, that registers our vote really nicely here, and it uses cookies in the browser to show that if we come back to this again. We also have the link here for the admin panel specifically, which obviously shows us all of the results. And we can also close the poll as well, which goes ahead and shuts that poll off, and it's now closed. So there were just a couple of like small bugs here that needed ironing out, nothing super unusual. It would have been great if it would have worked the first time, but the reality is that the non-deterministic nature of LLMs means we can't get it right every time. Okay, so we've got a couple more minutes. I'm actually going to cut this short because we don't want to eat too much into the Q&A. But you know what you're doing, and feel free to continue to work through the hands-on exercise and let me know in the comments if anything went wrong. So yeah, we'll move on to just wrap up really quickly, and then we'll answer some questions in the Q&A, which I am looking forward to. There's some great questions here. So let's just really quickly cover the loop. We'll just really quickly summarize this. Let me just move myself out of the way. Okay, so the loop end to end looks like this. We proposed a change, probably too big of a change, but you kind of get the idea. We then refine it, and we keep doing that. So we've got sort of this like refinement loop at the start, but then we've got this inner loop where we apply a change, we pause it, we fix anything that we spot going wrong, particularly on new products. We monitor the code, we don't just let it do it by itself in the background, and then we resume. And we keep doing that over and over again. And then, of course, the last step, once we're happy with the change, we've fixed it, fixed anything up that's gone wrong, we go ahead and archive this. So this is the workflow for a single change. We've done a massive one today, but we've still been successful just with a tiny hiccup. Remember, I've not had to go through and I've not had to argue with my agent or go ahead and fix too much up. I've not even looked at the code yet, really, which usually I would dive in and look at the code as we go. I wanted to keep this sort of agnostic as possible. So this pays off because you and the agent already agree on what you're building. So the specs is the source of truth. When we come to the next change, the agent, next agent session, or the next teammate, we will start from the same place. We test the spec, so we can poke at the spec before the code exists, which if we would have spent maybe like 30 to 40 minutes doing in this session, if we had time, we probably would have got a better result from the start, although I'm actually really happy with what we came out with today. And it's slower now, faster later. So it does feel really, really slow. I've mentioned this before. Using this methodology of spec-driven development and not prompting, it feels slower. It feels like you're not making any progress until the end, but actually you tend to get better results as you go. Okay, so I'm just going to check in on the sale real quick. We've got 3 seats left out of 50. So thank you so much to everyone that signed up. I'll give them a little check again in a minute, but that's absolutely amazing. And it's going to be great to have you on board. So we are now going to go to Q&A, and I'm going to answer as many questions as I possibly can. So I believe, let me just have a look here. Our team will probably flash some up behind the scenes. And yeah, here we go. Great. So what is the seniority level in Laravel or any framework that we need to start with spec-driven development? That's a really good question. I mean, I wouldn't say that. So to go in a completely different direction, I think before you start to use any kind of agent to generate code, you need to understand the code to some degree. You need to understand what the code is doing. You need to understand, particularly when it comes to security and performance, you need to know what's happening. Or really adding OpenSpec to it's almost like adding OpenSpec to vibe coding otherwise, or spec-driven development to vibe coding. Yes, you're using a spec, but then you don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes. So I'd just say as a general blanket rule for people who are still learning to code, use AI, but use it to learn to code. But don't jump in and do it without any knowledge. So I wouldn't say you need any specific seniority level. You just need to understand how to review the code that is being written by specs. And this stuff really helps as well when you have an understanding of what actually needs to be built. So if you're working as part of a team and someone hands you a task and that task is unclear, then of course, spec-driven development is going to be difficult. So it really is a team effort, unless of course you're working on your own, to understand what you're building before you let an agent build it. So hopefully that's answered your question. What would be your process for older apps that you want to do an OpenSpec init on? Okay. So what you can't do to start with, or what you shouldn't do, you probably could, is you don't go back and retrospectively generate a whole spec for your product. So there's no real need to do that. So really, the process is quite simple. You open up your app, open up your project in your terminal. You do an OpenSpec init on it. That will create the directories that we've seen through the workshop. And then you just start with your first proposal. So just start with, adding a small feature or making a change somewhere. Obviously for really tiny changes, don't bother. We're talking features here or real bug fixes or large refactors or performance profiling, stuff like that, and fixes. So just start with your first proposal, propose it, apply it, test it, and then archive it, and then that's done, and fold it into your spec. Now, as you go on from that point, you're going to get build up more and more context about your product. So you're going to end up with a much better spec. So you don't need to go back and retrospectively do anything. You just follow the process of proposing stuff and applying it. That's what you need to do. How do we avoid conflicts with other human teammates as we each locally work through the same task list? It's exactly the same process, Colin, as Git as managing Git conflicts. You basically, if you're, it's going to be quite unusual for you to hand over a half-finished task list to someone. The example that we saw today was a huge task list because we were basically building a whole product from scratch. But you would just make sure you commit the changes. And obviously, when you commit, you keep that OpenSpec directory within your source control. So you commit that OpenSpec directory for whichever framework you're using. So your task list lives alongside the changes that have been made. So you shouldn't get any conflicts there. They will pull down what you've left. They will see which tasks has been done. Their agent will see which tasks has been done. The great thing is that they might be using a completely different agent, and that doesn't matter because then their agent will just pick up from the task list as long as you have OpenSpec installed. And they just need to do OpenSpec in it and make sure that they select their agent as well. So, nothing will get overwritten with OpenSpec in it. It will just sync up. So that's really all you need to do. Just do commit stuff to source control, make sure it's up to date, make sure you're pulling down stuff like you would do with any other branch, like feature branch. How do we move any existing MD files sitting outside the project repo for feature specs into the project to use OpenSpec? That is a good question. I've never done this before, but here's what I would try. So I would, let's say, let's pick a feature. Let's pick the one that we were talking about. So adding a time limit to polls. Let's say that I had that document sitting elsewhere. What I would probably do is I would install an init OpenSpec. I would start up a new proposal, and I would pretty much just copy and paste that entire proposal document into OpenSpec. Now, the reason I would probably do that is because that is then going to read the entire context of the proposal that you have sitting outside for a feature, but then it's going to convert it into OpenSpec's format that it requires to actually function. So you'll probably get, it will capture what you have within your spec, but it will convert it over. And of course, you just go through the same process as reviewing it. And bear in mind that you could, if you've got multiple multiple MD files with each in, which it sounds like you probably have, then you can just keep proposing. You don't need to propose and then archive them, re-propose. You can propose and have like 10, 15, 20 proposals all in one go. You could, I wouldn't recommend that, but you can add all of your existing proposals if you want to. So yeah, you would just, I just copy and paste the markdown file straight into the propose command. Remember, what you can do is you can do OPSX propose, and then you can just paste a load of code, a load of markdown in. You don't need to re-describe it or anything like that. You can just paste it straight in. I'm not familiar with that, so I'm not the best to answer that. So we'll have to skip that one. How did this approach look like with a team of 20 engineers? Yeah, so one of the companies that I saw using OpenSpec when I was researching it was using probably not 20, but a good handful of engineers. So I'd probably say like 12 to 15. And it works really well because the question I answered before about the Git history, you're that's kind of like asking how does Git work with a team with 20 engineers? Well, it does work because you're keeping everything in sync. You're pushing up to a remote repository where everyone can access everything. So I would say it works really well because you do keep your specs alongside the features that you're building. If 10, or let's say 20, all of the 20 engineers were all working on different features, Everything gets synced up within source control anyway. Of course, you're going to get conflicts like you would any other way. Like, this doesn't solve the problem of, let's say we're building like multiple API endpoints, and someone builds like a service over here, and then someone builds like another service over here, and then they both do the same thing. Obviously, that's just an engineering problem that's always been the case as long as source control has been available. People are going to do different things, but you can sync up your specs and your proposals. So yeah, it works really well. It scales well as well. Right. Let me just bring this back. Um, okay, so can a new feature work on top of another spec? Can the agent use the experience of a previous spec to continue? Or even in the current spec, can I say something like, implement this next? I'm not 100% sure what you mean. I'm guessing you mean like adding like a proposal and then um, building on top of that. If you could just clarify in the chat, that'd be great, and then I'll come back to this question afterwards, or just pop another question in, and I'll happy to answer that. What's the benefit of using SED after the main structure of the project exists, compared to using the planning feature of Cursor? Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, pretty much like, why can't we just use plan mode for this? I totally get that. And to be honest, I still do use plan mode a lot. So, even for fairly not large, but like significant features, I will use plan mode as well. Um, I've been leaning a lot more into OpenSpec recently just because of the way that, as we've seen through the workshop, it retains the history of what I've done and the decisions that have been made. And I start to find myself as projects grow, first of all, using more usage because I have to go back my agent has to go back and figure out what I've already done. Whereas if you have the specs, they're a source of truth of what's what the current state of your project is. So as long as you're like consistently using propose, you do build up that history and that context of what's actually there. And I found that I move a little bit. Well, actually, I move a lot quicker using this approach. But that's not to say you have to use that. Bear in mind, if you do use plan mode, for example, if you do use the planning feature inside of Cursor to add a feature, and you are using OpenSpec too, that kind of feels like a conflict. Like, oh, I've changed something, but OpenSpec doesn't know about it. Well, actually, when you come to use a new proposal, or you come to create a new proposal, it probably will. I would personally recommend just sticking with one thing like OpenSpec. Um, and staying with it, but of course you can use you can use plan mode in between, and I still do that for like really small changes as well. OpenSpec added new skills to my GitHub folder. How do I avoid conflicts with my Copilot agents, or are they meant to work together? Oh, that's weird. Like, I didn't realize. I'm guessing you mean the GitHub folder um, inside of your project. I've not actually seen that before, um, but I'm guessing they're meant to work together. I mean, it should work across different agents anyway. So I'm guessing that's why that's been done. I've not seen that, so um, yeah, that's really strange. I haven't seen that before. I haven't seen that happen. Um, do you know if this could be also used in Unity projects, at least for architecture, entity definitions, and coherence of interactions between them? Possibly, yeah. I mean, I've only used it for what I use it for, so I can't comment specifically on Unity, but I'm guessing that it would work in exactly the same way. Bear in mind that there's no, OpenSpec is a framework, a structured framework for specs. So it should work in, whichever framework you're using, whichever language or platform that you're building on. So Yeah, I'm guessing it should work. I would try and init it, create up a new branch so you're not getting anything in the way, and just try and add a fairly small feature just to see how it actually works with it. But bear in mind, you can also, to guide it, I'm not massively familiar with Unity projects, but to guide it, you can head over to your config here. It's just YAML, so you can just fill this in. You can add in your tech stack here, the domain that you're working in. You can set per artifact rules as well. There's a bunch of configuration that you can do inside of here if you need to tweak things and get things working as you need them. Is there any impact to work with spec-driven development in a dev team, time related in a sprint? Um, I'm guessing you mean a negative impact on the time it takes. I would say as you get used to working with specs and as you sort of build a culture of working with specs rather than just making changes with agents, you should probably see a increase in in productivity because everyone's on board. You can share specs as well, which is another really great thing. So it's really difficult to share prompts or the output of prompts with team members, whereas if you are doing spec driven development, you can get other people to agree with an implementation before you implement it. It's kind of like a reverse code review where you can generate a spec, generate a task list, or look at the technical design decisions, hand it over to another member of the team, and then you could say, does this feel about right? They can say, no, this is what needs to change. You could change it. And then obviously like the 10% is just letting your agent go ahead and implement it. So yeah, I think I don't think it should have any impact on it. But yeah, it's one to watch for, and it's a good idea to experiment with things like this as well, for sure. I'm on a team with a few developers. We typically don't commit tooling files. I reckon it's useful to keep the spec context over time. But is there a way to persist them without checking in? Yeah, this is a difficult one because I wouldn't necessarily regard it as like it's not like you have like a shared skill file, or it kind of is, but because it's more of like a framework, the things that get generated are artifacts. So they're artifacts that are useful for the project. They're like integral to the project that you're actually building. They explain the project. And I think the great thing about sharing these specific types of artifacts with teams is that everyone can build on what everyone's done. Everyone can see what everyone is doing as well. I would say, yeah, sure. Like if you really want to use spec driven development and specifically OpenSpec and you don't want to commit these files, there's nothing wrong with just using it as an assisted tool to, get the spec, generate the feature, use that as your little like internal process just for you to look through the spec and then go ahead and have it build it and then just clear everything out. Like you absolutely could do that. And it's a massive upgrade over, just prompting your agent to get something right. So yeah, why not? There aren't really any rules. You can do what you want. I've not personally done that, but sure, like you could absolutely do that as well. In terms of persisting them, yeah, just do a git ignore. Like just do a git ignore on the OpenSpec directory, and you'll persist them for your use, but not for anyone else. But if all members of your team are all using OpenSpec, there's not really any reason not to commit the spec files and the artifacts that get generated to source control. Let's say team defined specs already exist in Notion. How can we integrate Notion seamlessly in an OpenSpec STD flow? Interesting question. Yeah, this is probably pretty common, to be honest. Again, what I would do is I would start to um, yeah, it's difficult. If it's like a living spec across your whole project, that's going to be really difficult to generate that open spec sort of spec format for that living spec that exists within. Personally, that I don't think there's anything wrong with having a spec outside of a project. I have multiple side projects where my specs just live in Claude, as in the web version of Claude. And the reason that my specs live in there with artifacts like markdown files and stuff, and Notion, Claude, whatever, it doesn't really matter where they live. The reason I find that useful is when I'm working on a project locally, I will go to Claude, I will click on like a starred project, one of my specs live in, and I'll say, I need to rethink this thing, like, or I can ask my spec a question, or I can test my spec, or I can generate new features from my spec. So there's nothing wrong with having that living outside of that. But as far as I know, there's not a way to sort of convert it all over or seamlessly like sync it in or integrate it. But what I would say is, if you wanted to start using OpenSpec or any of the others, you could just like propose something and then just treat it as like a fresh start. Like, I think I answered this question earlier as well. So like, treat each new proposal as a fresh start, build up that internal spec within within your project, and you actually might find you might not need Notion later. But what you could do, I guess, is what would be useful is you could sync it back the other way. So you could have like your open spec living inside of your source control, but you could host that on like GitHub Pages or something for everyone to see. Yeah, like I said, there are no correct ways to do things. Like, there are recommended workflows and recommended ways of doing things. But whatever works best for your team. I think this is just another great tool to help you. But you can tweak it to whatever you need to do. Okay, so as the archive grows, does the number of tokens also increase? Or more specifically, is the agent going through the entire archive or just the spec proposal we're working on? That is a really good question that I don't know the answer to. I haven't actually monitored that before. I'm going to guess that yes, with your existing spec, yes, um, it's going to use more tokens because obviously you're sending more data over to whichever service you're using. So I'm going to say yes, it probably does. I'm not sure it will by a significant amount. And also bear in mind that if we just take a look at the spec here that we've got for polls, this is like a super lightweight version of the decisions that we've made. I'm going to make a guess and say that your agent probably won't be reading these. You might need to tightly control that. You might need to create like a Claude ignore or a cursor ignore file specifically for the archive if you're worried about token usage. So just go and create that in the root directory .claude or .cursor ignore file if you haven't already, and just exclude specifically the archive that you have here, but allow specs. I think that would be a good way to monitor that. So you could go ahead and monitor that and see what it looks like. But yeah, really good question, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing it will use more tokens, but not significantly, and you can exclude stuff as well. Is there any problem when other teammates create changes without OpenSpec? For context of your OpenSpec, yeah, it can do. Yeah. So let me think of an example. So yeah, let's say you add a feature and you've got that wrapped up in your OpenSpec, not archive, but like you folded that into the living spec in your OpenAI. Sorry, in your OpenAI, in your OpenSpec folder or spec. Yes, let's just say that then later on someone removes that, it's not going to be represented within your spec because someone else has removed it. Now, that's an extreme example. Of course, someone could change something significant. In that case, of course, I think next time that you go and you create a new proposal, your proposal will then go ahead and it will see the current state of your code base, and then that current state of your code base will probably get folded back into your spec. So eventually stuff does sync up, but it is a good idea to have everyone using the same framework for specs and proposals as time goes on, for sure. If a feature builds on an archived spec, should we reference it? or does it automatically read the archive? Yeah, it will know what you have already done as part of your project, full stop. So it will know the features that you've added by looking through the archive files or the archive specs. So it will know the behavior of your application, what features are there. And of course, your agent does a lot of that work anyway. So this just really assists with that. So yeah, you don't need to worry about that at all. It will know what you're doing. How does OpenSpec compare to SpecKit? Are there any differences to using OpenSpec over SpecKit? I knew this question would come up. I have used SpecKit. I didn't like it as much. I can't really tell you why, like most tools. I just found OpenSpec incredibly easy to use. I would just try both. Like, I'm not here to tell anyone to use any specific tools at all, not Claude Code, not OpenSpec. I would just go ahead and experiment with them. And more importantly, if you're on a team, make sure everyone is on board with that as well. You know, it's like choosing, any tool or any framework or, anything that you use within a team. But I would experiment with both. The general sort of consensus I get is that OpenSpec is just generally a lot easier to use in terms of the workflows and how it folds in the changes that you already have into a living spec rather than have the individual proposals hang around, I think. But I haven't used it for a while. But yeah, personally, I like OpenSpec. I just give both a try. Right, we've got time for like a couple more questions before we go. So I'll answer two more and we'll head off. So if I use OpenSpec for a team, say 50 people, does it mean it will keep using Claude to reread the spec over and over many times? If so, would that make my cost very high? Yeah, I guess I sort of answered this earlier. So in this case, yeah, I haven't tested this myself, but potentially. So what I would do is I would, I'm. So here's the trade-off. I'm going to say that it's less token heavy to read even the archived features, depending on how many you have, let's like keep it reasonable. I would say, okay, well, let's say just the spec. So I'd say it's less token heavy to read the spec and the behavior of your application to get an idea of what your application does and how it behaves and what features you have. That's much less token heavy than scanning your entire code base or large parts of your code base, will it ever be? So yeah, maybe just monitor it. So perhaps exclude the changes directory. This is definitely something that I want to look into because these are some really good questions about usage, which I hadn't considered. But yeah, I would say generally looking at a few changes that you've made and some wrapped up specs is probably going to be less tokens than reading your code base over and over again as you jump into Claude and say, I need to build a new feature, or whichever agent, I need to build a new feature. And then when you get it, when it starts to say, right, let me look at the current state of the code base, and you think, oh, this is gonna really start to ramp up my usage because it's sending half of my code base up in tokens. Can OpenSpec be used with multiple agents, like for parallel work? Good question. I haven't actually experimented with this yet. Yes, it probably could be because each proposal that you create is completely separate. So technically, you could have multiple agents working on the same code base within like work trees or even just branches, whatever you want to do, whatever your workflow looks like personally, and then have them both create proposals and then both fulfill them proposals and then merge them together. As long as like with any development work and with any team of either humans or AI, if they're working on conflicting things, then of course you're going to have problems. But I don't see any reason why it couldn't. Again, that's something probably to experiment with as well. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. There's probably like millions of questions. Please feel free to add me on X if you have any questions. I'm actually going to open up my DMs as well, so you can go ahead and either send me a message or privately if you've got any other questions. I'm always happy to help. I'm always learning, so I'd love to hear from you. And if you did enjoy the workshop, we'd absolutely love to hear from you on Trustpilot as well. So you can either go over to trustpilot.com/review/unlearn.dev or scan the QR code as well. And we would really, really appreciate a review. I'm so sorry that the actual build didn't go well, but that's just how AI works. But I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful. And even if you don't use OpenSpec, I hope this has given you some food for thought around using specs for your project as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next workshop as well. Just before we go, I'm just going to check on seats here. And yeah, it looks like it's probably sold out here. Yeah, so we've sold out early access seats for the 50 that we were giving away during this workshop. So thank you so much to those 50 that signed up. You've joined us, and yeah, we can't wait. So yeah, thanks once again. And I look forward to seeing you soon. We are launching, let me just have a really quick look here. Yeah, if you just on the screen, if you missed side door access or if you missed the early access to Unlearn, feel free to go over and add the event to your calendar. This will, let me just go back to my slide. This will just let you know when we're reopening access to Unlearn, so you can get in and learn about this kind of stuff, but also a lot more as well. We've got huge plans for it. So yeah, we really look forward to seeing you there. Okay, so once again, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you again soon.